welcome to another edition of the Kilted Homesteader. Today we're going to talk about testing the coil, only one type of coil, on your N-Series tractors. There's lots of other videos out there, but when it came to the testing I have a side mount distributor on my 1952 Ford 8N. There wasn't a lot on there how to test the coil, and so I wanted to kind of help people out. Again, I'm not an expert in electrician or in testing, but this video is to show a lot of guys say, oh, my tractor's acting this way, and they automatically say, oh, the coil's bad. And that may be the case, but it could be points, it could be condenser, or if you have an electronic ignition, it could be a faulty electronic ignition. We're not going to get into testing all those things today. We're just going to talk about a basic side mount distributor coil test. And some of this may be very similar to the front mount coils, but I don't have a front mount tractor, so I can't test that or test that theory. One of the most valuable tools you can have as a home mechanic working on your own pieces of equipment, whether it be a lawnmower, a tractor, a car, anything like that, is a thing called a multimeter. I got this multimeter probably back in 2002, and I'm going to tell you, this thing has been worth its weight in gold. I think I bought it as Craftsman or a Sears years ago, and this thing has paid for itself over and over again with the ability to test circuitry and test systems to make sure they're working properly or to see if there's any problems. So again, this isn't going to be an all-inclusive video, but this is going to be a basic overall on how I tested my coil to determine that it was bad. Okay, I let the cat out of the bag. The coil was bad on this situation. So first thing you want to do is I'm going to explain to you, there is a primary and a secondary fields in your coil, okay? The primary fields are the ones that are connected to this, which is a whole bunch of windings wrapped around a center coil, a center section here. Also inside of your coil, it can be either filled with epoxy, like this one was, or an oil. And sometimes this one, you could shake it, you won't hear anything rattling inside. But some of the brand new coil that's filled with oil, you shake it a little bit and you can hear a little oil moving around in there, slopping around a little bit. And that's there to keep the coil cooled down and help maintain its perfect homeostasis, so to speak. So the primary windings are connected here. You have a negative on this side and a positive on this side. Often you'll see it'll say positive or neg on one of them, and if one's neg, the other's positive. Or you'll see a plus sign for positive or minus sign for negative. This has the plus and minus. So to test this coil, we're going to first test the primary windings in the coil to see where they're at. Now, when you connect to your multimeter right here, your black is going to connect to your ground, or your one that's often referred to as the COM, like common ground. And your red is going to connect on this one here. If I go on this side, it works for a tachometer, which is very handy. I've used that too. Or this side here is for testing ohms and resistance. Ohms is a measurement of resistance in an electrical current. So if you have, if I turn this on right here, we'll go to the lower settings because that's what we're going to be using. There's a whole bunch of ohm settings that you can use. For this here, we're going to go down to the lower one right there, one of the lower ones. Right here, this is saying 0.1, which is telling me that there's infinite amount of ohms. And because of that, the infinite amount of ohms, you would refer that as a break in the connection. There's a break in the wire because it's not working. However, if I then took these two leads, they're obviously broken. There's no connection to them, so we have infinite amount of ohms. On this one referred to as, I said gnomes again. Ohms. Yeah, the gnomes are gonna hate me. Ohms is 0.1, meaning infinite, okay? Now, if I connect them together, touch them together, that reading is gonna change to resistance. The better the connection, the lower that ohm reading, not gnome reading, the lower that ohm reading will be. I have them alligator clipped together, zero resistance. It's telling me that any current I'm putting through, all of it's getting through and it's making the connection good. So, that being said, we're gonna test the ohms in this coil. Now, one thing I do want to tell you, there's different types of coils. There's ones that have a built-in resistor, which resistor is creating ohms. It's giving a little barrier for that electricity to have to work through. And there's ones that have no internal resistance. The original ones for the 6-volt tractor will have an external resistor. In other words, there should be no resistance in the coil when we test it. Now, my tractor was converted to 12-volt prior to me getting it, and I decided to put an electronic ignition on it. I put a Petronics on it. So I needed a coil with an internal resistor. And the internal resistor on this one is 3 ohms of resistance is what I should be measuring when I connect to the primary windings, these ones right here, okay? If there's not supposed to be, if it's a non-resistant type, it should be basically a perfect connection between here and here with no resistance. Okay, so we're going to connect to this, and I should have 3 ohms around there, give or take. Okay, so I'm going to connect this here, the negative to the negative side after we connected it to the multimeter, and the positive to the positive side of the primary windings. Whoops, I'm going to get that alligator clip to stay on there. Probably be easier if I took the nuts off, but we'll just leave them like that. Now, I connected to those connections right there. My multimeter is showing me infinite resistance. In other words, it's telling me internally, inside this coil, there's a break in the windings. So that's why one day I went out to my tractor, started to try to start my tractor. It would not start, no spark whatsoever. Obviously looking for fuel, the fuel was there, look for spark, no spark. That kind of honed me in on the coil. Wasn't 100%, it was either that or the electronic ignition. We tested the coil. Oh, and that's the other thing too. You need to disconnect your wires off your coil here in order to test the circuit so you don't have any outside interference from your other wiring. So you're going to do it independently of itself, this electrical system, this setup right here. So I have infinite number of ohms, which is telling me there's a break in the wiring, and obviously it's not going to work. Now it's possible, not always, some guys say, my tractor runs great, it gets hot, it dies. In that situation, if you suspect the coil, when it's hot and then when it dies like that, test that system right away. If you may have a break in the system that kind of temporarily goes away or comes there, and then when the coil comes down, things kind of relax, get back together, it works again. The coil cools down, it works again. It's like an intermittent problem. That's why it's important to test your coil. Don't just assume it's a coil. You don't want to be a parts replacer. Yeah, the parts are affordable and easy to do, but it's best to test it versus just guess, well, I guess the points are bad, or oh, it must be the condenser, or points in condenser, or this and that. Test. This is why you have why it's good to have a multimeter, so you could test our system out prior to buying parts. When I hooked that up and saw I didn't have 3 ohms of resistance, or even 4 or 5, but infinite, I knew I had a bad coil. Ordered a new coil, put it into place, bumped it, started right up, ran like a champ. Now, the secondary windings are this one here. This is where your coil wire plugs into. Your coil wire then goes from here and goes over to your distributor. So to test this, you're gonna also do the same type of thing, and the manufacturer will tell you how much resistance should be there in between these. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be for this one, but each manufacturer has a setting what it should be. You'd have to contact them, find out for what the reading should be. But I will show you, this is the result I got. You could take either one of these off, but you're just taking the other one and you're gonna test it right in here, put it on that metal in there, and you're gonna see here, let me show you first. On my gauge, we have no resistance when I go right directly to it. However, I take that lead, touch it inside to the metal prong inside, infinite resistance, which is telling me there's still an internal break even on that circuit. So that's my secondary circuit. So that's showing me there's an issue there and there's an issue in my primary. Again, I'm not getting any, it's totally resistant. There's a break in the wire internally. This is how you test the coil. Don't just assume, don't be a parts replacer. I'm trying to teach you how to do this. There are also other videos out there, maybe more complicated. I tried to break this down to the basics. Front mount distributors may be very similar in nature. I'm going to talk to some guys and see if we can find that out, so maybe we can talk about how to test them too. But this is the side mount distributor. Again, you got to know whether it's an internal resistor or if it has an external resistor. And then of course, that's the other thing too. You could test your resistor that you have by putting a lead just like this on either side of your resistor on your tractor and seeing if you have too much resistance, there's a break in the resistor. Those are all little tests you can take. I encourage you to buy a multimeter. I can't remember what I paid for it. My dad has always been a test light guy. Hey, I got a test light. I'll use a test light, and they're great, but they don't always tell you voltage. They don't tell you resistance. It's either bright, dim, or doesn't work. I bought my dad a inexpensive multimeter, I think, for less than $20 at Harbor Freight, and it works and it does the job. You don't have to go out and buy the Cadillac. Like I said, this is the best investment you can make if you do any of your own work or if you want to test your stuff rather than having to hire it out. I hope you found this video interesting. I hope you found value in this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any suggestions or comments, just keep them respectful. Please be sure to post them below. And if you want to be notified of future videos coming out, hit the notification button, and I also want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Do I know it all? Absolutely not, but these are little tricks of the trade I picked up along the way that I wanted to share with you. So thank you again for tuning in to another edition of the Kilted Homesteader.